In today's lesson, we are going to be using all of the steps in the order of operations. Please make sure you show all of your work, and when asked to solve a problem and stop the video, make sure you do so you can check for your own understanding. I'd like to start with an exponent review. An exponent is when you have a problem that looks like this. 5 to the third power, or 5 cubed. You need to remember that the 3 on the top is the exponent. Now, if you recall what the exponent does, is the exponent tells you the number of times to multiply the base. The base number is the bigger number on the bottom. So if we are looking at this problem, 5 to the third, or 5 cubed, that means we are taking the base number, 5, 3 times. So 5 times 5 times 5. We are multiplying all of those 5s together. So we will start with 5 times 5, which is 25, and we will bring down the next number, and then we'll do 25 times 5. Now sometimes we have to do work off to the side to make sure we know what we're doing. So 25 times 5, 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2, 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So we get 125. That is what 5 to the third, or 5 cubed, equals. Now the reason we needed to review that is because part of our order of operations is exponents, so we need to make sure that we really know how to solve each part of the problem. Let's write down this example. If I have 17 minus 5 to the second power divided by parenthesis 2 plus 3, close parenthesis. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working through this box chart on the left. Now the first thing we look for in any number expression, numerical expression, the first thing we're going to look for is if there's any sort of grouping symbol. Now what a lot of people call that is parentheses. I like to call it grouping symbols because it's more than just parentheses that we're looking for. When we're looking for problems, or the first step that we need to do, it's parentheses, but it's also brackets. So you're looking for things like parentheses, brackets, or another type of bracket. If we look at the problem that we have right here, do you have any grouping symbols in this problem? And you see that there are parentheses, so we're going to start by doing 2 plus 3. And just like we've been doing the last couple days, you're going to solve that part of the problem, and then you're going to go back and rewrite everything. So we see 2 plus 3 is 5, and then we're going to make sure to rewrite everything exactly like it's written, so we don't make any mistakes as far as our properties go. Now before we move on to the next step, you always have to re-ask yourself. The first thing is grouping symbols. Are there any other grouping symbols in this problem? And there aren't. So because there aren't, now we can move on to the next step. The next thing we're always going to be looking for are exponents. And in reality, what we're looking for is not only exponents, but all exponents and square roots. So if we look at our example, do we have any exponents or square roots in our problem? And we see that we do have 5 to the second power. So we need to solve that next. So 5 times 5. Remember, it's not 5 times 2. If it were 5 times 2, they would write 5 times 2. So 5 times 5 is 25. And then we need to make sure we write the rest of the problem exactly like it's written. Now we go back again and ask ourselves, are there any other exponents or square roots? And there aren't. So we can move on to our next step. And our next step is to look for multiplication or division. Now remember, it is not multiplication first and division second. It's multiplication or division. We are going to go from left to right. So whatever comes first. If it comes, if multiplication comes first, you will multiply. And if division comes first, you will divide. It depends on what comes first in the problem, or even if both of them are in there. So when I look at what I have here, I do have multiplication or division. I only have one of them, and it is 25 divided by 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5, and we are going to write the rest of our problem in the same order that they have it. And we go back and ask ourselves, is there any other multiplication or division? The answer is no, so we can move on to our next problem, or our next step, which is addition or subtraction. And again, it is or. It's whatever comes first from left to right. You will either add or subtract whatever comes first. Well, what we have in this problem is just a subtraction problem. So I can take that 17 minus 5 and subtract and get 12. And you'll notice that we still have our mathematical Dorito that we like to talk about, or our mathematical slice of pizza that we like to talk about, just with more steps. So a couple reminders as we're doing this. We need to make sure that we always follow the order of operation inside the parentheses. What I mean by that is if you have parentheses and within the parentheses there is an addition and a multiplication, you need to make sure that you do the multiplication before the addition. You have to follow the same steps. It's almost like it's a brand new problem inside the parentheses. The other thing you need to remember is that as we're going through this, you want to keep asking yourself each step until the answer is no. We've talked about this in the days past. When you look at grouping symbols or parentheses, the very first step, you have to keep asking yourself, are there any parentheses or grouping symbols? Until the answer is no. So you don't move on to the next step until the previous step has nothing left. So in other words, keep checking the order until you are positive there is nothing left in each step. So as a shortcut, we know that what people call the order of operations oftentimes is PEMDAS. We need to remember that even though it's PEMDAS, parentheses stands for all grouping symbols. Exponents also stand for square roots. Multiplication and division is in either order depending on what comes first, left to right. And addition or subtraction is whatever comes first from left to right. So if you're going to be using this acronym, you can use it, but you have to be careful that you don't get stuck in the lettering. Okay, so we have 3 examples that I'm going to have you try on your own first, and then come back and check how you did. Remember, if you ever get something wrong, you need to make sure that you erase it and fix it in your notes so you have correct examples to look at. Okay, so on the back of your paper, please write PEMDAS on the top and example 1. Our first example is 36 minus 1 times 4 to the second power plus 5. I would like you to try to solve this one on your own and see how you do. And then when you come back, if you have steps that are incorrect, please make sure you fix your mistakes. Give it a try. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at if there's any grouping symbols or parentheses. If I look at this problem, I see that there are no grouping symbols. So it says no to parentheses, so I know I can move on. The second step you should look for is exponents or square roots. You see that you do have 4 to the second power, which is 4 times 4. So you should do 4 times 4, which is 16, and then rewrite the rest of the problem. Continue to ask yourself again, are there any other exponents? The answer is no, so I'm done with the exponents. Now I'm looking for multiplication and division, going from left to the right. I look at, I have 36 minus 1 times, I see that I have a times there. So I know that I need to do 1 times 16. 1 times 16 is 16. And then I write the rest of the problem, realizing that when I do 1 times 16, the 1 and the 1 times 16 are gone and just the answer is written in the problem. I ask myself, is there any other multiplication or division? I look from left to right. There's a minus and a plus. There's nothing. So I have no more multiplication or division. Then I look for addition or subtraction from left to right. It is so tempting to do 16 plus 5 first, but you have to start with 36 minus 16. In this problem, you should have gotten 20, and then write what's left. And again, there's only an addition problem left, so I do 20 plus 5, which is 25. My final answer is 25. I do have my mathematical pizza or Dorito. Now you should be checking if you got 25 for your answer, and if you didn't, look to see where you went wrong, and then make the corrections to your paper. All right, let's move on to our next example. In our second example, we have brackets and parentheses. So it's bracket 2 times parenthesis 14 divided by 7, close parenthesis, close bracket, minus 3. Now, this is why we use grouping symbols instead of parentheses. Sometimes you'll have multiple grouping symbols within a problem. What you need to understand is that when you have multiple sets of grouping symbols, you do the innermost set first. So when I look at this one, I have brackets and parentheses. That means I have to do the parentheses before I do the brackets. You have to understand that you don't get rid of the grouping symbol until you have solved every part of what's inside the grouping symbol. And I'll show that when I go over this. I'd like you to try it out first, though, and see how you do. So pause the recording and see what you get. Okay, so when I said do the innermost grouping symbol first, if I'm looking at what we have here, we have brackets and parentheses. The parentheses are inside the brackets, so we have to start by doing the parentheses. I have 14 divided by 7, which is 2. And when I think about it, or when I look at it, I have solved everything inside those parentheses, so I don't need to write the parentheses anymore. I have the times 2 here. The brackets are still around because I haven't solved everything inside the brackets yet. And minus 3. So when we keep asking ourselves, first, are there any grouping symbols? You started with 14 divided by 7. And then you ask yourself again, are there any other grouping symbols? You still have yes. So you can't move on to anything else. We have to continue solving what's inside our grouping symbols, which is 2 times 2. That equals 4. Now that everything inside that grouping symbol is solved, I don't need to write those brackets anymore, and I can just rewrite the problem, or what's left of the problem. So are there any other parentheses? The answer is no. I don't have any more parentheses. And then I ask if there's any exponents. No, there's no exponents. Is there any multiplication or division? Not anymore. Is there any addition or subtraction? Yes, I'm left with 4 minus 3, which is 1. So the final answer is 1. Again, if you got this wrong, go back and look to see where you missed the order and fix the problem. Now we're going to move on to example 3. Now example 3 has it all. It's got brackets, it's got parentheses, it's got exponents. It's tough. So try it out, see how you do, and come back and check the answer. Okay, so we have bracket 20 minus parenthesis 3 plus 2 squared, close parenthesis, times 2, close bracket, plus 5. Wow. The first thing I'm looking for is grouping symbols. I have 2 sets of grouping symbols. I have brackets and parentheses. So brackets and parentheses. Now remember what we said, excuse me, is that we have to do the innermost grouping symbol first. So I'm going to start with the parentheses. And on the front of our notes, we also wrote that you need to follow the order of operations inside the parentheses. So if I am looking at 3 plus 2 squared, and I'm trying to decide what I have to do first there's a plus and there's an exponent. So you have to solve exponents before you do addition. So the first thing I'm going to do when I solve this is I'm going to do the 2 times 2 for 2 squared, which is 4. And I'm going to write 4 plus 3, and it's still going to be in the parentheses because we haven't solved everything in there yet. I'm going to rewrite the times 2 and the minus 20 minus, and the plus 5. So I still have that same grouping symbol, that innermost grouping symbol. So I'm going to solve the 3 plus 4 next, which is 7. Now I have solved everything inside that parenthesis, so I can drop the parentheses and just continue to write what's outside of it, keeping the brackets because we have not solved everything inside the brackets yet. Now this step is where a lot of people start to make some mistakes. When I look at my bracket now, because I still have parentheses, a lot of people want to do that 20 minus 7 first. But what you have to remember in the order of operations is that multiplication and division comes before addition and subtraction. So because of that, if I'm going to be solving what's in these brackets, I have to do the 7 times 2 first because it's multiplication. 7 times 2 is 14. The 20 is still in front of it. It's still in brackets because I haven't solved everything inside of it. Now I have 20 minus 14, and that's all I have in there. So I can do the 20 minus 14, which is 6. I don't have to write the brackets anymore because I've solved everything inside there. And then I add 5. And 6 plus 5 is 11. All right, so if you got that right, I am totally impressed. If you didn't get that right, go back and check where you went wrong in your steps and make sure you fix your work. You're going to show the notes to the teacher and get your worksheet. Good luck. Enjoy.